General Motors definitely knows their SUVs, and Cadillac knows their luxury SUVs and SUV customers. GM not only sells more full-size SUVs than any other car company out there, they sell more luxury SUVs, which is why we're now getting an all-electric Cadillac Escalade, the Escalade IQ, and it shares absolutely nothing with the other Escalade. If you get nothing else out of this video, here are the key things to know. You'll get 450 miles of range, 750 horsepower, and this is about the size as the biggest Escalade that they've ever built so far.
Hey everybody, I'm down here at the bottom of your screen hitting the pause button for just a moment because I was able to film the Cadillac Escalade IQ several weeks before its launch in New York City today. And unfortunately, at that time, Cadillac did not have a lot of specifications to share. So where appropriate, you're going to see an on-screen note that gives the specification that's relevant for the particular section. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to take an even deeper dive into how the new Cadillac Escalade IQ compares with the Cadillac Escalade and the Cadillac Escalade ESV that are currently on sale. So stay tuned for that.
It's 100% electric and 100% dedicated EV. But now let's talk about some of the details. You'll notice that the front end design is instantly recognizable as a Cadillac and a little bit related to the Cadillac Lyriq. Also, we get the same sort of LED animations up front with this illuminated panel in the center here. Instead of a grille, we get the shield and that LED illumination because not as much cooling is required in an EV. We know there's some other big EVs coming soon, but what differentiates the Cadillac from what we expect to see from Wagoneer is that this is a dedicated EV platform. It's not simply a converted body-on-frame vehicle, even though it has this magnificent long hood proportion. That's because Cadillac wanted the Escalade IQ to be more than just an electric three-row vehicle. They wanted it to be a statement vehicle. They wanted it to really scream, "I'm Cadillac and I'm an enormous Escalade." And that's why they didn't really shrink anything versus the gasoline model. In fact, this is the same size approximately on the outside as the biggest Escalade that they've ever built. And we have some really huge wheels and tires. These are 24-inch wheels, 35-inch tires. These are the biggest ones Cadillac has ever put on an Escalade. And to be honest, the rest of the Escalade is so enormous that they just look about the right size compared to it. And more interesting to me at least is that oftentimes when luxury manufacturers put really big wheels on vehicles, you get really skinny tires. But these are still 50 series tires. Let's take a look at the tire size in this one, 275 50 R24s. These are absolutely enormous wheels and tires, but again, they really fit with the proportions of the Escalade. Hanging out more or less in this blacked out area between the wheels is where the battery lives. It's going to be a 24 module Ultimum battery pack with a capacity over 200 kilowatt hours, although Cadillac is not giving us as many details as I might like. It's most likely about 212 kilowatt hours, although we'll let every Google sleuth out there try and find the EPA filing if you want the official number. Back here we see the only major difference in terms of general styling versus the regular Cadillac Escalade, or the gasoline Escalade I should say. We have a slightly sloping roof profile and we have a two-tone roof that's available. You can get it either body colored or in this black color depending on your personal preferences. And this third row window is styled a little bit like the Cadillac Lyriq. We then have a slightly more aerodynamic profile to the rear hatch. Perhaps the least imposing view for this definitely imposing vehicle is the rear end view, where it's a blend of current generation Escalade and a little bit of Cadillac Lyriq tossed in there as well. We have these very slim LED taillights, but they are really large because you can see that this is still a very tall vehicle, even though that roof line does slope a little bit towards the rear. Back here we have the typical Cadillac badging, big Cadillac logo in the middle, 1000E over there on that side. That's the way that Cadillac is describing the torque from the engine or the electric motors in their particular vehicles. Basically, they take the torque, which is over 780 pound-feet, they convert it to newton meters, and then they give us that on the back. So about 1,000 newton meters of torque. Down at the bottom of the bumper, we find a hitch receiver because the Escalade IQ is going to be able to tow 8,000 pounds when properly equipped. Now let's grab the camera and take a more detailed look around the vehicle. Again, we have that 24 module Ultimum battery pack underneath. This will support 800 volt DC fast charging, so Cadillac is saying 100 miles of range in just 10 minutes. From the dual motors, you'll get 750 horsepower, 758 pound-feet of torque. Back here, you'll see the J1772 and CCS charge connector. A little bit later, the NACS native connector is going to come to this, but you will be able to charge at supercharger stations with the adapter, of course, and NACS, as it rolls out, we're just going to be seeing a lot of adapters. Back here in the cargo area, it is apparently a little bit smaller than the extended wheelbase Escalade, but we have an advantage that that extended wheelbase Escalade does not have with the front trunk. Let's just skip the interior really quick and go over to that front trunk so you can see what is under this enormous hood. This is somewhere over 12 cubic feet of storage space under here. It is a little bit smaller than I had expected based on the size of the hood, but you can see you could definitely put golf clubs, large items in there, and it really has a sleek look. It's also going to be powered, of course. In the front trunk, we have a 400-watt inverter outlet. There is going to be vehicle-to-load capability and vehicle-to-home capability, but we don't have all the details just yet. I suspect it's going to be pretty similar to the other Ultium family vehicles, so expect a pretty high amount of power output from the system. And speaking of powered, the front and rear doors will optionally be powered as well. As you approach the Escalade, if it has that particular option, the front door will just open for you, and then it will automatically close as you put your foot on the brake pedal. You can see that the interior is definitely different from the regular Escalade or the gasoline Escalade because we have a much more tech-focused and much more luxurious interior in here. Check out this enormous screen. It's about 55 inches of screen running across the dashboard. We have this incredibly large driver's display, which houses the instrument cluster, also the infotainment system in the middle, and then we have a dedicated passenger display on the other side that has a prism in it, so it's not going to be viewable to the driver unless the vehicle is parked. So that way you can share that content or you can just have the passenger watch that as you're driving along. Moving over to the doors, you can see we have a very different design as well over here. If we zoom in on that, you can see we have some laser cut sections in that wood trim. It is real wood trim, it's been laser cut. Then you have the customizable ambient lighting shining right through that. The controls for the front seats are up there, heated and ventilated and massaging front seats. It really appears that Cadillac is going all out, even though technically I guess you could say this is not the Cadillac flagship, because that would actually be the Celestiq, which is going to be even more expensive than this Escalade. This is going to start at around $130,000, but Cadillac has not said how much the top-end versions will be. I wouldn't be surprised if it started to get a little bit close to that flagship Cadillac. There's a separate screen there in the middle of the dash. We then have what appears to be a control knob for the infotainment system, two large cup holders there. Unfortunately, I can't hop inside, but check out that center console. It's really obvious when you look at elements like that they didn't simply shrink down an Escalade and make it an electric car. They made an electric Escalade that happened to be about the same size as the regular model. Down here we have additional storage space that's enabled, of course, by that large skateboard-style battery pack underneath the vehicle. The steering wheel is a different design than we've seen from Cadillac for a while here. We have lots of touch buttons and physical buttons right there. You can see the display for Ultra Cruise and Super Cruise right here on top of the steering wheel. Super Cruise is going to be standard. Ultra Cruise will be optional. That's going to bring expanded functionality to the hands-free driving system. There are some controls over here for things like the ride height. Obviously, we're going to have an air suspension in here, opening and closing the front trunk, the dimmers, lots and lots of wood trim, lots and lots of stitched materials going on here as well. And if you didn't notice already, lots of speakers. If you get the executive second row, there will be 40 speakers in here, including speakers on the ceiling, speakers on the doors, dash, even the rear seat headrests. These rear seats are going to be really interesting to try. Again, unfortunately, I can't hop back here to actually test them out myself, but we're going to get an airline-style tray that's going to pop out of the center console here so you can work in the rear, and these are going to be the most comfortable seats ever found in an Escalade. Really, the Escalade IQ is full of an awful lot of firsts for the Escalade brand. Here in the center console, you can see we have a control unit there to adjust all the settings for the rear passengers, doors, the ambient lighting, etc. Two big cup holders there. Again, more storage enabled by that flat floor. Here's a closer look at the rear doors. You can see that we have lots of attractive materials going on here, stitched materials on the upper section of the dashboard, that laser etched wood with the ambient lighting, and lots of storage going on the doors as well. Now again, unfortunately, I can't go inside, but I can try and reach around and show you that third row back there. According to Cadillac, the third row is going to have a little bit less headroom than we find in the gasoline Escalade, and that's pretty logical because of that sloping rear window. But I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps the rest of the seat was a little bit more comfortable just due to the general dimensions that are available in an EV, the flat floor, etc. That will have to wait until we can actually get in one. As far as the wheelbase goes, Cadillac says that this is about the same wheelbase as the extended wheelbase gasoline Escalade, so that should give you some general idea about the dimensions available on the inside. Going back to the cargo area, you can see that those third row seats fold in a 60-40 fashion, and most folks are probably going to keep them folded most of the time. This is a pre-production prototype, so I can't open everything, but apparently under this load floor there will be a small amount of additional storage. One of the cool touches with this infotainment screen is that it is a single big curve that just goes all the way across the dashboard, and you can see that it even has the AKG speakers integrated into each side there. Now, this has caused a bit of controversy, but General Motors has said that this is not going to support smartphone integration. Instead, they've decided to focus on their own in-car entertainment experience. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section. Of course, if that's still not enough screen for you, there's also a color heads-up display. Here's a view of the other side of the interior from the passenger side, and in case you're wondering, it will have a glove compartment. I know that's something that's been deleted on a decent number of EVs, but this gives you a really good idea of absolutely how enormous that screen is right there in the dashboard. And you almost forget it, but there is a complete line of air vents running just under that on the dashboard. Don't worry, traditional luxury shoppers, there is still quite a lot of wood going on in here. Cadillac has not forgotten you, and in this particular trim, it is apparently ash, although there are going to be a number of different wood options, at least some in the future. As you'd expect, there are going to be a number of different interior color options and material choices. Here are some of the ones that Cadillac has brought along. These are going to be the 4 ones available at launch. We have sort of a navy blue, a tan, sort of camel color right there, charcoal, and then a just off-white with definitely some interesting stitching patterns. And then it looks like there are going to be 6 exterior colors available at launch, and they have some examples over here in case you're wondering. The red definitely, I think, would look interesting on that electric car. With a starting price of around $130,000 and an Escalade-sized presence, there really isn't anything on the market to compete with the Escalade right away. We are going to see some very big and very expensive electric vehicles from European luxury manufacturers, like, of course, Land Rover, or as they've renamed everything, Range Rover is now a standalone brand. And, of course, Rolls-Royce and Bentley will eventually have their own big SUVs. But I suspect none of them are going to be as big or as opulent as this Escalade. You might logically expect that Rolls-Royce and Bentley will give you more doodads on the inside, but as far as road presence, I'm pretty sure the Escalade is going to have them all beat. What the future holds from the American competitors, we just don't know yet. We expect at some point in time that there's going to be a Lincoln competitor and that there's going to be a Wagoneer competitor, but the Wagoneer competitor we know a bit more about, and we know that it's going to be a regular body-on-frame vehicle that has been effectively converted to an electric vehicle. There are obviously pros and cons to that. One of the cons is that it may not have a battery as big as we find in the Escalade, and it may not drive like the Escalade either. One big advantage of designing an all-new, from the ground up, essentially unibody, rugged platform like this for a battery electric vehicle is going to be driving dynamics, and that's certainly something that Escalade shoppers are interested in. That's actually been one of the reasons that the Cadillac Escalade has continued to evolve over the years and get features like adaptive suspension, independent suspension, etc., because Escalade shoppers are really demanding premium ride and premium handling capabilities. And with this model, they're getting all of that at a very premium price tag. Again, starting at $130,000 and going all the way up to who knows where, but probably maybe somewhat adjacent to the flagship Cadillac electric vehicle that's going to be on the roads very soon.
If you've made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking with it. Let's dive into the detailed specs that Cadillac has sent along. There are still a few things missing. For instance, we don't know curb weight, but again, they're saying 450 miles of EV range. They're now saying about a 200 kilowatt hour battery. Before they weren't giving official specifications, now they seem to be giving us more or less a specific one there. I suspect that true highway range is going to be somewhere in the 300 to 350 mile range, of course. The 750 horsepower, 785 pound-feet of torque is going to happen in Velocity Max mode. In regular drive mode, it's going to drop down to 680 horsepower, 615 pound-feet of torque. And this is a dual-motor EV. It's not a three-motor EV like the Hummer truck. Now, I mentioned the Hummer truck because the dimensions here are pretty insane. This is 224.3 inches long. That is only 3 inches shorter than the long wheelbase Escalade, the longest Escalade they've ever made. Still more than a foot longer than the short wheelbase model. It's actually longer than the Hummer EV truck, or obviously the Hummer EV SUV. That one's quite a bit shorter. The wheelbase 136.2. That wheelbase is 2 inches longer than the regular Escalade ESV, which is already fantastically long. The other interesting specification is the width of the new EV version of the Escalade, 85.3 inches wide. That is basically the same width as the Hummer, really wide if you didn't know it. That is about 4 inches wider than the current generation Cadillac Escalade in gasoline form. That's a big, big deal. Also interesting, it's going to be about as high as the current generation ESV. Now, one of the reasons for that is maybe not so good. We're going to get 6.9 inches of ground clearance rather than 8 inches of ground clearance like we find in the Escalade, logically because of the battery pack. So the interior seems to be maybe slightly taller than the interior in the Escalade gasoline, but on the outside, that battery pack occupies a little bit of extra space. Now, they did give us headroom, legroom, and shoulder room figures, so let's just roll through those right here. Headroom for the first and second rows is better in the electric version than in the gasoline version, but you will notice that the gasoline version gives you 1 extra inch of third row room. They warned me that might be the case back there, and it is indeed true. We also get less legroom in the Escalade IQ. That did surprise me because of its size, but it all seems to have something to do with that really long hood proportion. If you didn't notice in the video, that hood is fantastically long. It does appear to be longer than the gasoline Escalade designed for big V8 engines under the hood. So 116.6 inches of combined legroom is what we get in the IQ version. The big area that loses is, of course, the third row. It gets 6 inches less than you find in the Escalade ESV and 5 inches less than you'll find in the short wheelbase Escalade. Hip room is pretty similar, but shoulder room, that's the distance across this area of the cabin, is definitely narrower in the Escalade IQ versus the Escalade ESV. So even though it's much wider up front, by the time it gets to the back, it is considerably narrower. The greenhouse really tapers in back there. So that is definitely something to keep in mind if you plan on using the third row frequently. On the other hand, the second row and the first row are definitely roomier. When it comes to cargo, we have a specification now. 23.7 cubic feet behind the third row, 69 cubic feet behind the second row, 109 cubic feet behind the first row. Those are very good numbers when you take a look at them compared to the average mid-size SUV, but compared to the gasoline Escalade, you'll notice it's definitely smaller. It's about 22 cubic feet or so smaller on the inside. That one has 142 cubic feet behind the first row, 41.5 cubic feet behind the third row, and that would be for the Escalade ESV, of course. The short wheelbase Escalade, it is a little bit more cargo room in the EV version than the short wheelbase version, if you include the front trunk, of course. But even including the front trunk, cargo area in the EV version is going to be below the ESV version. Towing, that's kind of interesting. 8,000 pounds towing capability in the Escalade IQ. I would expect that to be pretty much all versions. Definitely seems to beat some of the Escalade formats, which will drop as low as 7,300 pounds. Again, we don't know any curb weight specifications for Escalade IQ, but if I were going to make an assumption, I would bet it's going to be around 9,000 pounds. The Hummer truck is between 9,400 and 9,500 pounds. The Hummer SUV between 8,500 and 8,600 pounds or so. This is a 3-row version, much bigger than the Hummer EV SUV, so definitely keep that in mind. And remember, it is somewhat similar in terms of size. It's actually bigger than the Hummer truck. Here's how the Hummer truck stacks up. The Cadillac is 1 foot longer than the new Hummer truck, about the same wheelbase. The body is very similar in width up front. It's actually wider, mirror end to mirror end. And the roofline is 4 inches higher than the Hummer EV. So it is a very, very big SUV. Let me know what you think about all that additional detail, and let me know what you think about the Cadillac Escalade IQ down there in the comment section. This has to be the most bonkers EV that anybody has designed to date. It is fantastically huge. It's going to be wicked inefficient, I'm pretty sure. I would be willing to bet that out on the open highway, it's going to be decently below 2 miles per kilowatt hour. But this is the kind of vehicle that I have said for a long time we actually need, because if you're going to convince, theoretically, people that are buying a regular Escalade or an Escalade V, and you're going to convince them to buy an EV, you need to have something that's equally big and equally bonkers for them to move into, and that is certainly what we're going to see in this model, especially its price tag, which is upwards from $130,000. And if that sounds like a lot, remember that the new Cadillac Celestiq is actually going to be about $340,000, $350,000 starting. So, the Escalade IQ could actually be seen as maybe a better value. And in case you're wondering, yes, it is an Escalade IQ. It is not an Escaladic, because that probably would sound weird. Anyway, let me know what you think about all that down there, and I'll see all of you next week.